Emergency early prisoner releases last year. Thousands were let out early to make sure there was space for new convicts. Ever since, the government's been searching for a longer-term solution. Today, ministers accepted recommendations to free up nearly 10,000 prison places by cutting back on short sentences and introducing a new early release scheme.
My view is that it's not necessary for us to have doubled our prison population since 1993, which is what we've done. And it's not necessary for England and Wales to have the highest incarceration rate of anywhere in Western Europe, that we should move away from that approach.
David Gauke, the former Tory cabinet minister, recommends release 1/3 in on a fixed-term prison sentence. That could be followed by serving the next third of the sentence on strict licence, monitored by electronic tag, before serving the final third of their sentence without supervision but potentially on recall to prison if they reoffend. More serious criminals on fixed-term sentences over 4 years for violent and sexual offences could be released halfway through their sentences. David Gauke says early release should be linked to good behaviour inside prison. He also recommends that prison sentences less than 12 months should become exceptional, with more community sentences. This could particularly reduce the female prison population. Anna, who's been supported by NACRO, was given a 2-year sentence for her first minor offence decades ago and says that tipped her into a life of crime.
My first offence, when I went into prison, I learnt more in the first, I would say, 6 days of being in there from people that had been in, out. And unfortunately, it just sent me on the same path. So you're learning how to con people and how to use that knowledge to commit offences. And that was the start of it, and it carried on for 40 plus years.
This will feel slightly tighter.
Much more tagging will be needed. The Justice Select Committee has just revealed that Serco, the main government provider, has been fined for poor performance every month since they took on the contract. And more prisoners in the community will need much more supervision from a probation service, which the main union says is in crisis.
We've seen a continued increase in workloads and a decrease in staffing, with many people leaving in their thousands because the service is so unbearable to work with. That then creates a cycle of low morale, low pay.
The Justice Secretary said to get prison numbers down, she'd secured extra cash to boost probation and tagging. The government's accepted most of David Gauke's recommendations, but not early release for the most serious offenders. Some feel the perpetual calls for higher sentences could quickly bring the prison population right back to capacity pretty soon.
In my kind of 20 years experience in prisons, the average tariff for a life sentence prisoner had almost doubled. But actually, the kind of offences for which people were presenting with or convicted of, and the risk that they posed hadn't changed significantly. So unless there is significant overhaul and clearer guidance, not just targeting shorter sentences, but also looking at the whole system, we're going to be operating at really close to capacity for some time.
The Justice Secretary says she's learnt from Texas, but experts say that state struggles to cope with ever longer sentences handed out.
Texas has not solved its prison problems, and I want to be very clear about that. We have the largest state prison system in the country, and our system, even though we brought down our numbers some years ago, the numbers have been on the rise, and the predictions are that we're going to be full again very, very soon and looking for more space. So if you don't take all the steps necessary to reduce the population and keep it down, you're going to be in the same place a few years from now.
The report recommends widening the use of libido-suppressing drugs for some sex offenders on a voluntary basis.
I will go further, with a national rollout beginning in 2 regions covering 20 prisons, and I am exploring whether mandating the approach is possible.
When you hear the government saying they're actually interested in potentially making this compulsory, do you think that's a little bit of red meat for the tabloids on a day when your report might have caused them a bit of pain?
It's for the government to decide
You've
what
been
they
round the
want
block, you
to
know
do.
what they're up to.
We're setting up our recommendations. What the government says is for them to say.
It would mean overhauling long-standing medical laws requiring consent. One more radical proposal as the government tries to wrestle with rising prison numbers at the same time as public concern about crime is on the rise too.
Well, I spoke to the Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood earlier and first asked her to explain what she meant when she said that the prison system was on the cusp of total collapse when she first took office.
When I walked into the Ministry of Justice the day after the general election last year, we were just days away from the prison system in this country from collapsing entirely. And it's why I had to take an early decision to do emergency releases. In the summer of last year, when we had the summer of disorder, we only had 5 prison places in the whole of the northwest in this country. We have been on the point of collapse throughout my time in office based on the inheritance left to me by the Conservative government.
Right, so today's review marks quite a sort of radical change of direction, and yet, when and if it's implemented, we'll still have one of the highest prison populations in Western Europe. I mean, is that prison population too high?
Well, look, the prison population will rise. What I announced last week is that I've secured £4.7 billion of funding from the Treasury to build prison places. We are going to have the largest expansion of prison buildings since the Victorian era, but we will still have this shortfall.
My point is it's a policy decision, isn't it? Because if you look at, it's nearly double what it was when Michael Howard, Conservative Home Secretary, seen as really hard line when he said that prison works. So do you believe that prison works or not?
Look, I believe in prison. I believe in punishing people by curtailing their liberty and sending them to prison. And I believe that in a well-run prison system, where you're not permanently on the brink of collapse, prison works. Unfortunately, at the moment in our country, prison is not working. And there's 2 reasons for that. The first is that we've been in this permanent cycle of crisis for some time under the previous government. The other problem with why prison isn't working, though, is 80% of offenders today are re-offenders. And so our prisons today are churning out better criminals rather than better citizens. Yeah. And I'm determined that we turn that around.
But that does suggest that prison doesn't work.
The situation we've inherited, though, is that even that largest expansion since the Victorian era, even that rate of build is not enough to cope with the demand that is coming into the system. So we've got this problem, we've got this gap, we will run out of prison places again, and it's why we've had to take the measures that we are today.
So the Domestic Abuse Commissioner says that women's lives are at risk from the fact that you're releasing domestic abusers early. Why don't you just exempt all domestic abusers from that early release programme?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is the one thing we have to avoid at all costs is a collapse in the prison system. We would have to say to police they can't make arrests. Cases would have to stop going through the courts, and we'd effectively have to shut the front door into prisons.
But
I'm not willing to let that happen.
Yeah, but women are being put at risk from the failure of successive governments. I'm not putting it all on you, but it is a policy failure over many years, and women are being put at risk because of that.
I think the whole country is at risk if the prison system collapses. I think we do see the breakdown of law and order at that point, and I do think that at that stage that you'd have complete chaos and criminals will be running amok in this country, and I cannot allow that. No responsible government.
But now it's just domestic abusers running amok.
No responsible government could ever allow that to happen.
Yeah, but you are allowing domestic abusers out early. So I wonder what you say to a rape victim who sees her rapist released from prison when he hasn't even served half of his sentence.
Well, look, I'm as angry and as furious as everybody else, including the Domestic Abuse Commissioner and others, for the situation that we find ourselves in. But there will be exclusions. Those whom judges deem to be dangerous, who get a different type of sentence, will be excluded from the new earned progression model. And I've been very clear that the earned progression model means you have to earn your way to an earlier release.
Can you guarantee there will be no more emergency releases?
Look, when I took the early emergency release power that I did when I first came into office to stop us running out of place, I knew that that was buying us time. It bought us less time than we thought, and it's why I had to make changes again last week on fixed term recall to buy us some more time.
So you might have to do that again.
Well, I don't want to, and we're straining every sinew to make sure we're not in that position. That's what I have to avoid at all costs.
Right, so you might have to come back for more. Angela Rayner calling for wealth taxes to raise revenue. Doesn't the U-turn on the winter fuel allowance make tax rises inevitable, really, now, further tax rises?
Well, look, I'm not going to get ahead of any future fiscal events or speak for the Chancellor of the Exchequer in that regard. She makes these decisions. Rachel will make those decisions ahead of future fiscal events.
Angela Rayner was quite happy to get ahead of the Chancellor. I mean, is she on manoeuvres here?
Oh, look, I'm not going to get into speculation and Westminster tit for tat. Angela is a Deputy Prime Minister. She's working closely with the PM and with the Chancellor on delivering her agenda.
Shabana Mahmood, thank you very much.
Thank you.